I see. Good morning.
That might be more comfortable because this one kind of snags a bit.
Good morning. See who we have here. Good morning, good morning, good morning. The more of you sign on, the more you all shrink. To fit all the pictures on the screen, you see, you get smaller and smaller pictures, so we have to look very carefully because you've got really small. Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. How are we doing with people coming? Yes? So, welcome, 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 welcome. Perhaps we could just settle for a few moments together. See how fast you can get to your working face. The other day I said, to your cold face, and Stephen didn't know what I was talking about. I realized that the digital age has far surpassed the coal age, so the metaphor didn't really work. Right? But there's a sense sometimes, with familiarity in a life of Dharma, we can have a sense of sitting down and very rapidly getting right to our kind of age of work. And we don't have to spend hours getting there. We can just go straight there. Oomph. And of course, this is quite simple to do. It's very easy to do because your working face is none other than you, as you are right now. What other working face do we have? as you know, it's quite common for us to begin a session with prayers, some sort of prayer of aspiration. And I'm just wondering if prayer for many people is almost like throwing something, an ideal up front that you can aim towards. You know, you sort of go for it. Right? But let's have a prayer which isn't like that. Right? Let's imagine a prayer as being a remembering of what we deeply value and already deeply value and know. It's a prayer of remembrance rather than a prayer of reaching for something. I take refuge in wisdom. I take refuge in compassion. I take refuge in non-clinging awareness. May I actively cultivate generosity, wholesome relating, patience, skilled use of energy, a continuity of caring and enquiry, and profound understanding. May I and all beings awaken speedily for the sake of everything and everyone. However innumerable beings are, I vow to meet them with kindness and interest. However inexhaustible the states of suffering are, I vow to touch them with patience and love. However immeasurable the dharmas are, I vow to explore them deeply and thoroughly. However incomparable the mystery of interbeing, I vow to surrender to it freely. From this day forth, with wisdom and compassion as my lamp and staff, I dedicate all my life energies to the welfare of all beings. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. I'd like to make a little bit of space now to see if there are any observations arising or questions arising from your experimenting with this theme of living with wisdom, compassion, and non-clinging responsiveness. Talking about it's kind of not that useful. Experimenting with it can be extremely revealing and useful. So I'm going to just pause for a moment and see if people, I haven't done a sound check here, but I'm assuming everyone on the Zoom can hear me. This way I don't have to kind of yell. So if Stephen, perhaps you can keep an eye on the Zoom if I'm not noticing, and just see if anyone has something they'd like to share or bring forth now. And then we'll see if we can go a little bit further in this great, massive topic, samadhi. Anne? And can you try and speak, if the people in here try to speak clearly enough so that the Zoom people can hear?
Yes, thank you, Touch, and good morning, everybody. So, there's two things that I want to bring to you for some clarification and also to share with my observation. So this morning I read something that talked about letting go of the safety of absolutes, and I found that a really interesting idea and it's intellectual,
Mm-hmm.
and it stimulated my interest and joy actually, and also just interest. So letting go of the safety of absolutes. And then the other thing I want to bring is that, so I get up in the morning, or I sit here, and the suggestion to sit and pause and take a few minutes. So and then in the mornings, which I regularly do. So generally the first thing that happens is that I notice tensions, and it's usually linked with fears and expectations. That's the first thing, and my body is tense, shoulders up, la la la. And then I settle, and I loved the way you talked about this morning, getting quickly to the working face, and I'm having that experience more and more, I suppose because anyway, there it is. And then I often go into a type of fatigue when I realise how much tension I've been carrying around. There's a type of fatigue and a type of dullness, and even though it's like I've slept really well all night and it's whatever time it is in the morning, I want to go to sleep again, but I don't. It's not because I need more sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And then I use the supports that are given to us in the various meditation teachings, and then something more interesting, or no, not even, I don't even want to use that word, more interesting, then something else happens.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm with that. And then the time of that practice ends, and then there's something else that happens, and it takes up most of the day. But I wouldn't say there's those qualities present, but possibly they are. So that's what I wanted to bring, because it is really important.
Mm.
It is my living.
Mm-hmm.
It is, and possibly it's not just singular to me. I don't know.
Mm.
Mm.
Well, that's a good introduction to the class. There's a I don't want to make this sound like I'm complaining. I'm not complaining. I'm just describing a reality, and that is that there's in this type of gathering where we don't, everybody's welcome. We have a big range of ages. We have a big range of life experience. We have a big range of, experience with Buddhism and Buddhist practice or Dharma practice or contemplative practice. There's quite a vast range. And so what some people are working on, it's just that their working face is really different from where another person's working face is. I mean, everyone's working face is the same. It's their face. Right? It's just, but that doesn't really tell us much. Right? There's the path of our engagement with these questions could be described as a path of gradual increasing subtlety, right? And it's a kind of a subtlety of question, which often is preceded or dominated by words and thoughts and verbal question, right? So, and it kind of and that serves the purpose of waking us up, alerting us, right? And so we can, at the beginning, our questions are generally what kind of alerts us is a really crude stuff, a disaster, right? The roof falls on your head. It's like that. Oh, you wake up. This like seriously alerts you, and then a little bit more common. You're going to be really dull to have to be started that way. But what a lot of people start with is their face is a face of judgment. And when I say your face is always changing, and the metaphor breaks down really easily. But it's a sense of you make sense of the world. One makes sense of the world. It's very common in terms of victims and oppressors, and in terms of revenge and justice, and this kind of thing. And so that's a question. It gets people awake. Oh, you deserve it. You can. It's a crude. It's not subtle at all, right? And then, but gradually, by working in this, like, how does it work? How can I make this work as best as I can? Which might lead us into looking for understanding and so on. And you're working in these rather quite socially conventional ways, right? Of dealing with a sense of being a victim or undeserving or the kind of and actually we have to deal with being oppressors. I mean, it works in both directions, and a sense of moving from revenge to justice kind of thing, and then gradually as we go further in we're woken up by this question of bang. Namgyal once said, nobody gives a damn about awakening when they're feeling good. The Buddha said, I teach but two things, suffering and the cessation of suffering. It begins, like when we don't have any sense of suffering or unsatisfactoriness whatsoever, then we don't in any conventional way have some compulsion to be somewhere else. I mean, we may, I'm feeling really good. Well, that's enough. I've had my good time. Now I've got to get back to... Right? But you know what I'm saying, right? What motivates us to do something, right? And so it begins there, right? And then as we start to look into it, maybe we get to a point where our main view is not one of our coal face isn't kind of working at dealing with victim or oppressor or revenger or justice and so forth and making it right. But we may find ourselves that, it doesn't seem to matter what we do there's still a mess. And we start to discover something much more subtle, much more, it's called acceptance, right? And then we start to learn, that's our cold face. We're kind of working with acceptance, kind of accepting whatever goes along. And what kind of questions await, who's accepting what? And what does it mean for me to accept? Right, etc., etc., And then gradually it gets more subtle, and it goes from acceptance to a kind of a recognition of a kind of a collaborative co-arising. It's not just merely accepting this. I'm beginning to see that we all are kind of collaborating together in bringing forth this world of experience. So it starts to involve other people, and then it gets even more subtle, and we see interweavings of interbeing, interknowing, and this kind of play of the field, the expanse, you might say, of knowing and being. So it's starting to get very, very subtle compared to back at the stage where it was about kind of victims and oppressors and so forth. And so we can apply the same kinds of things. You can try and come back to your breath. And the way someone's going to come back to their breath who's working with the cruder level, less subtle. I don't mean crude with a value judgment. I'm trying to say it's kind of ephemeral. It's like it starts to become more and more ephemeral and translucent and, right, going from lumpy, opaque, clunk, 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 right? And we can look at how we understand samadhi. Samadhi means like resting in the universe that we have the confidence and competence to know. Like, this is reality, and I'm resting in it. However, there's gross reality, subtle reality, very subtle reality, most subtle reality. You know what I mean? There's an increasing subtlety. And so the practices that we use and the supports that we might use. Well, actually, we could even use very similar supports all the way through. But actually, it's very different work that's taking place. And I want to talk more about this today. But this sense of recognizing that not only is this, like the difficulty here is that everyone is in different places. I'm trying to say something that will speak to everyone who's here. Right? Subtle people go, oh yeah, that was profound. Crude people go, oh yeah, that was useful. So this is the kind of a challenge, in a sense, right? But actually, it's not a challenge to me. It's a challenge to the whole of the universe, because actually this is just what's going on all the time. And to make matters worse, in the morning I was crude, and in the afternoon I was subtle, and then in the evening I was crude again, or vice versa. Right? It's not just, if it was just one nice smooth kind of thing, well, I've achieved stream entry, right? Now I'm working on, right? And then you think back in the evening, you go, what was I saying? Gee, stream entry. It's like, when there's Buddha, there's Buddha. The sixth patriarch, Zen patriarch, once said, when you're Buddha, and when you're not Buddha, you're not Buddha. I quite liked that. That kind of resonated for me, because it made it a little easier for me to be messed up in the morning and then clear in the afternoon, and then I didn't feel I was completely straying. After all, the sixth patriarch identified this. Right? But yeah, I think this is a big one. Right? How do I work with this? It's the whole question, and it perhaps stays with us for a long time. This question. I'm not so sure it ends. You might come to a point where you feel it's ended for you, but then you realize that you're still in relationship with a lot of other people for whom it hasn't ended, and you're in a sense dragged into the realm of assumptions and expectations, because you have to relate to all the other creatures in the world. So, not only, this is the Mahayana tradition, it's not good enough to awaken. We're not really awakened until every single sentient creature is awakened, which is pretty inconceivable to me, which might as well say forever we're working on this. But it doesn't mean just slugging away at the same old thing. It gets more and more kind of, subtle, malleable, flexible, workable, right? And with that comes creativity and experimentation, and with that comes some joy and some interest, right? But we'll get to that, if we're not already at that. And grinning away for those that can't see. That sounds just Are there any other small little beginning points for today? Let's continue a little bit. Here's some different words of remembrance. I'm giving up praying. I'm just doing words of remembrance. Okay. I take refuge in wisdom, compassion, and non-clinging awareness. I take refuge in the full richness of here. I take refuge in the ever-present immediacy of now. truth is all pervading. It is the suchness of this moment, the thusness that we are. My refuge is to live within the truth, to be the truth living within itself. My cold face. And we've been looking at this idea of samadhi, and samadhi is sometimes seen as various forms of meditation practice. Right? Could even be, some people would even use it interchangeably in the six parami. They say, oh, then you get to meditation. But samadhi, as I'm trying to sort of speak about it, right, is really there's only one samadhi. Right? We might call it Mahamudra, we might call it samma-samadhi, we might call it union with truth or with reality. There's all these little samadhis, if you like, drinking tea samadhi and so forth. But this samadhi that we're talking about in the six parami, right, is like resting in the full richness of being. And this verse of remembrance talks about taking refuge in the full richness of here and the ever-present immediacy of now. And this is something which is how can I put it? This is the point where it becomes samadhi work or it's not samadhi work. There's a prayer. Used to do lots of prayers, right, in my early days, and we had this initial set of prayers that a Tibetan nun translated from various Kagyu texts, Sister Palmo, and it was called the Garland of Morning Praises, and lots of us had this, and we carried it around, and we do these prayers every day. And in one of the prayers, there's this phrase which didn't really inspire a lot of people. It seemed to really put them off, right? Because the line went, renunciation is the legs of meditation, so our gurus say. May I not be attached to food and wealth. And then it goes on and on, right? Renunciation is the legs of meditation, right? And, it just sounds so kind of bleak and negative to many people. We're going to renounce this. And especially, I knew what renunciation meant. It means you shave your head bald and put on monk robes, and that's renunciation. I quite got into it. It was like quite heroic, right? And I managed to live as a renunciant without renouncing anything, right? I was like, imagine for a moment that, deep down behind all these words there's a kind of more subtle message. Renouncing the belief that there's a tomorrow and a yesterday that's more important than right here and now is the legs of meditation, so our gurus say. Right? We're not talking about renouncing your favorite piece of chocolate cake, second piece, or whatever it is. That's not the renunciation. That's really crude renunciation. But there's renunciation at the beginning, it's crude. In the middle, it's kind of interbeing, and at the end, it's ungraspable. Right? So we're talking about high-grade renunciation. This is instruction for beings who are right on the edge of they're so close to glimpsing the Mahamudra, it slips away from them. Right? And so this is kind of a reminder for them. Renunciation is the legs of meditation. And this is like absolutely fundamental. I take refuge in the full richness of here. I take refuge in the ever-present immediacy of now. As opposed to I take refuge in the likelihood and the hope that tomorrow will be better, right? You understand what I'm getting at, right? This is like if you actually were to take a they used to be called efficiency experts. There's probably all kinds of current phrases for these kinds of people. And they go into a factory or an office with a stopwatch and they time how long it takes to do everything, you see, and see how efficient the staff was, and then tell the boss that, well, you could cut down on the coffee breaks and you could get more production out of your staff by doing, you're kind of efficiency expert, right? And if you were to walk around, like behind yourself, keep imagine you have a little schizoid moment, and you split in two, and one of you runs around behind you with a stopwatch, and the other one gets on with living the day. You can forget, just ignore me. I'm just kind of fly on the wall with the stopwatch, right? And every time you're spending it investing a lot of body, speech, mind together, like a tremendous investment in tomorrow, right? Like you're stepping out of the full richness of here, right? And the reason why we don't live in the full richness of here is because we don't really have the confidence that here is rich. There's this feeling that the tomorrow is going to be richer. Or maybe I'm a bit kind of nostalgic. Yesterday was richer. Right? The good old days. Remember the good old days, right? Life's tough now, right? In the good old days when we're all hippies and had nothing to do, and great. So we're kind of I take refuge in kind of, well, you're not in the past. You're still sitting in this room, but your energies are all going there. And thoughts and activities are causing physiological changes in your body, which are happening here. Okay? And somehow to get to this point, we need to, how could we come to a confidence that all of our living takes place at the moment of our living? It's not really a technique for this, but this is somehow, until we do this, we don't have legs to meditate, because the place of meditation is in the full richness of here and the ever-present immediacy of now. That's where meditation takes place. That's where samadhi work takes place. You can do meditation exercises, aimed at tomorrow and aimed at the past. But what we're talking about here is what on earth is going on? And what's going on now, the full richness of here, the ever-present immediacy of now, right in the middle, and of your samadhi in the morning meditation practice. But then, of course, it's the full richness of here and the ever-present immediacy of now in the utterly different state in the afternoon. But could we begin to at least theoretically, maybe we need to think about this. Maybe we should really look into this. It's worth examining. It's frightening how much time we spend dreaming up the future and reminiscing on the past to the ignoring of the present. Right? And now then people say, well, the present is this kind of, you've got to think about the future. How can you live without thinking about the future? You simply live thinking about the future. Thinking about the future is happening right now too. I mean, intellectually, this is not difficult to understand. But then you go, well, if it's so easy to understand, it's not difficult. Like, well, how come people just don't live there that way, right? And so we realize that there's a lot of inertia, we've sort of stepped into this journey, and the journey was already going. We've got a culture that does this. We've got, belief systems and so on. We've invested a huge amount of cultural living into fabricating this, and it's got its energy, right? And you're just going to stop, and everyone goes, "Hey, what's the matter with you? You're why are you being sane? All the rest of us are being insane." So I like this phrase, the full richness of here, because it reminds me that it would be worth having a look at it and appreciating what is the full richness of here. You think of your meditation as being, well, I got to have the right posture, and I have to focus on my breath, and I have to do it at 6 o'clock in the morning, and then in the evening, and have regular practice and so on. But imagine for a moment you shifted that and started thinking that what is the real coalface is maybe first of all just remembering the possibility of a full richness of here. And the ever-present immediacy of now. It's like you can't get the now because it's already the next now. It's ever present too. It's always now. Now, you see, we could think, well, what can I do to sort of establish this so it's really true? And then I could really do some meditation. I could learn the subtle teaching of mind practice. Right? But imagine for a moment we could approach it differently. Right? Let's pretend it's a full richness of here and an ever-present immediacy of now, and begin to learn the art of entering more fully into this. And recognizing that it may be that what we call supports can help us doing that. So maybe, and whatever your supports are, smiling, breathing, present, right? We're here, right? Smiling, breathing, present, appreciating the full richness of here, right? I appreciate the full richness of here. I just don't know what it is. Well, how can you say you appreciate? The appreciating of it is the act of acknowledging it and knowing it. Right? And so there's kind of two things that we're working with, right, in samadhi practice. We get to the point where we can finally begin to, we kind of know. We forget all the time. We've got a habit pattern that takes us somewhere else. That's what happens. But we know. Intellectually, we understand this. That the place of the coal face of exploration, like it's actually interesting. It's got to become interesting what's happening here. The reason why people are off into tomorrow and yesterday is because now doesn't feel interesting enough. This is kind of renunciation through total passion. It's a strange, like to be totally passionate about what's actually happening, and automatically you've renounced all the stuff that's not happening. If you're passionately interested, like how does this, what on earth's going on? And we have these two qualities that we're beginning to work with, which weave back and forth through each other, samatha and vipassana. Right? There's a quality of samatha is like this kind of calm, settled, confident, open, not afraid to be vulnerable. That's not a normal definition of samatha. not afraid to be vulnerable. It's too much of a mouthful, but all of these are hinting at the kind of this quality that's there. This is something we're working with. And there's the vipassana is like the quality of discernment, awakeness, brightness, curiosity, interest. Right? And at the beginning, at the crude level, we start to say, well, I need calm first of all. So I'm just doing samatha meditation because vipassana is too advanced for me. It's kind of profound understanding and deep seeing, and I just get hijacked into verbalization. So I'm just doing samatha. And so we're resting. We're learning the arts. Smiling, breathing, present. And we are, in a sense, coming again and again and again to looking to kind of feeling, sensitizing ourselves to what's going on in our body, what's going on in our feelings, what's going on in the mind states, and so on. Right? But at the same time, right, there's a kind of the interest, the curiosity, that's on the vipassana side. And so in the natural flowing of whatever is occurring, we cultivate continuity of profoundly nourishing ease. This is our work phase, suffused with serene alertness and vivid discernment. Whether walking, sitting, standing, lying down, blowing bubbles, flying through the sky, in other words, in the midst of any posture and activity whatsoever, allow everything to rest in its own place. Okay? And we need to ask ourselves this question, what to me is profoundly nourishing ease? Each person has to ask this question for themselves, what to really know, what brings a sense of ease? What is ease? What is samatha? Right? What is it? I mean, so it's all very well to say, well, calm, so I'm trying to be calm. Have any of you ever had a moment of trying to be calm? Right? It's the most kind of frustrating, agitating situation. Right? When I say profoundly nourishing ease, you see, ease and alertness can also go into, ease can become so easy it kind of feels like dullness. And alertness can be so alert it feels like agitation. Right? You're kind of agitated, just like this. And right, we're learning, in a sense, we're kind of aspiring to work with this. Can I? Dullness is not it. Right? I mean, in profoundly nourishing ease. So have you ever been sort of fairly relaxed in your body and you're still uneasy? Okay. I mean, things aren't too bad, but there's a kind of uneasy. What does it mean to be easy? Like profoundly nourishing ease emotionally? Or kind of mentally, conceptually? What does it mean to, how can I nourish a continuity of profoundly nourishing ease and think? Because actually, I think thinking is a very common experience for humans, and I think trying to dump it, like I'm going to have a state of non-thinking, is to somehow miss something. Perhaps by ease I mean, like for some people, ease means that your muscles kind of soften. The whole story of ease is a story of gravity and your relationship with gravity. You find it kind of get more and more easeful. As the closer you get to horizontal, the more the kind of the ultimate ease, right? I mean, when ease means relax the muscles, okay? But how do you relax an assumption? Right? It's not the same kind of, you can't go about, you go to the masseur and say, oh, I've got tense assumptions. could you give me a massage? You're going to massage the assumptions. Right? Well, there is something in there, right? Because you're kind of kneading it, you're massaging it, you're kind of pummeling it a bit, you're touching it, you're comforting it, you're warming it, you're stretching it, you're making it more soft and malleable, right? So your assumptions go from being brittle to being a little bit more malleable to a bit more translucent. We're kind of moving in this direction of translucentizing. And how do I let go of assumptions about what I should be doing and shouldn't be doing? And what's left if I don't have assumptions? It may be really exciting. I let go of all my assumptions, and then what's left is dullness. Right? I remember the first time I had an opportunity to do a solo retreat, I was thrilled. I was given 3 months that I could go and retreat at the Dharma Center of Canada, and I was being supported for the first time in my life. And I was back at the Beaver Dam cabin, which is back in the isolation block of the Dharma Center, and it was the middle of winter, and there was nobody else around, and it didn't matter to me that the Beaver Dam cabin had no insulation, no floor. Well, it had a floor, but it had boards with cracks. So I just went to the local dump because we didn't have any money. Renunciation is the legs of meditation, no money. And ransacked through the local dump, got a whole lot of corrugated cardboard, put it all over the floor. Great, got floor. There was an old wrecked airtight stove that was rusting apart. I stuffed that in the corner and shoved the chimney out the window because I didn't want to bother making a hole in the roof and doing it properly because I wanted to get down and meditate. Right? And so there I was in heaven, right? And I went in and sat down in this tiny little hut, very, very small little hut. And I suddenly realized that little hut was just absolutely crowded. There seemed like there were thousands of people in that hut, and they were all carrying out conversations, some of them very high kind of intellectual conversations on the nature of shunyata and suchness and mind and so on, and others were just cracking dirty jokes down in the corner, and others were singing advertising jingles, and others were just gossiping with each other, and I didn't even know who they were. And my mum was in there, and my dad was in there, my brother and sister, and Namjo was all over the lot. And then to make matters worse, I was in there too. I was describing it and defending myself and justifying what I was doing, and it was like, it wasn't profoundly nourishing ease at all. And I set my clock. I sat there because, I'm being supported and everything. I feel I have to meditate, so I meditate all day long. I really worked at it. I worked so hard at it, and I tried to knock down the hindrances, right? And I applied the supports and everything. And the reality was that after a number of months there, not seeing anybody, any human body, there were lots of other critters there. Things started to get a little quiet. And then one day, I achieved nirvana, right? It became totally silent. And I just rested in the oneness. And I was able to sit for hours at a time. So long I sat that I wrecked my left leg, and it's been damaged ever since. Right? I was able to just sit, and nothing much happened. I didn't really notice very much. There wasn't anything happening. There was probably emptiness. That's what it was. That's why nothing was happening. It was emptiness. And it was very peaceful, and there was no one there, and I just sat there, and the time went by. I could sit for hours. It just felt like minutes. Fantastic. Wonderful. Occasionally it kind of broke out from that, but I kind of learned how to nourish that state, and I became quite good at it. I could just slip into that in the morning, stay with it most of the day. And then after the retreat was over, I flew to Crete to rejoin Namgyal, who was teaching there. And we were driving in a car, and it seemed like I ought to give a meditation report. So I was actually dying to tell him of my realization. He was probably going to offer me a throne or a crown or something, or it'd be some kind of fantastic reward for my brilliant realization. And so I described the state, well, sir, it was all crazy, and then suddenly it went just absolutely still. And I was able to sit in the stillness for hours, and nothing much was happening, and it was just like, and he burst out laughing. This was his response. This is my 3 months of effort at meditation. He laughed, ha 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 ha, frozen ice practice. I never heard of frozen ice practice. The term, I'd never heard of the term at all, right? Well, frozen ice practice is just mastery of dullness. Right? This is master dullness, right? So I become yogi of dullness, right? A great cultivator of dullness, right? And so in that dullness, I wasn't actually appreciating the full richness of here. I was appreciating the diminished chaos of here. Understand? Like I was satisfied for less problems in my life. Okay? But something wasn't awakening up yet, right? The vipassana, right? And you begin to see that this kind of, and the ever-present immediacy of now kind of didn't really even enter my mind at that time, I must say. It was more the full richness of here, and here was spread all over the lot. Okay? But we have this kind of oscillation, if you like, between dullness and agitation in our meditation. And the agitation can be on the side of anything from, negative agitations through to kind of, you're suddenly describing to yourself your experience and wondering whether this experience is going in the right direction or not. Seems quite reasonable kind of conversation you're having with yourself. But compared to just throwing ourselves into, like releasing into the fullness, the full richness of here, the ever-present immediacy of now. Truth is all-pervading. It is this suchness. And we're starting to increasingly go, not how do I find a calm space, or even a calm and clear space, but what on earth's going on, and at the kind of, and how do I engage with this what is going on in a way that somehow is most life affirming. And in an interesting way, we could say that the samma-samadhi, like complete full samadhi, probably has all the elements of what we call the Brahma Vihara. There's a quality of loving kindness, right? And loving kindness, as I frequently point out, is not some theoretical, conceptual generality that just gets applied to everyone. People say, oh, I'm practicing loving kindness meditation, metta bhavana, right? And sending out love to all beings. And in the process, sometimes they're sending out love to all beings, but they're not sending out love to this being, the mosquito that's biting them on their knee. Right? It's kind of like it's going out there, right? They're sending it out to all beings, but they're not sending it out to their desperate need to send it out. Right? that as we're last week or last time we met, I was making a comment on this about love and clear seeing and the possibility that the clear seeing was not different from love. Right? And or we could say clear seeing, clear knowing, rich knowing. Right? There's a kind of an enriching of our experience. Just pause for a moment. And see if you can find your way through to your cold face. And when you think you're somewhere near there, just check out. Right? Profoundly nourishing ease, suffused with serene alertness and vivid discernment. Right? Do you go to a place that's sort of like almost like dulling down? Right? How can you wake that up? You don't wake it up by doing a wake up process that you learn from somebody. That never works, because what you're doing is you're not waking them up, you're following instructions. Right? Each one of us has to, in a sense, be prepared to learn how to wake it up. Right? And at a crude level, we can wake it up by opening our sense doors. It's like you don't have to be in a profound state to open or close your eyes. Well, you do actually. You have to be magnificently alive. That's fantastic. But you can do that. Right? We can be seeing. Right? Where's your dullness now? Yeah, but as soon as I open my eyes and start seeing, it starts going into agitation. So I want to shut out the agitation. I close my eyes and then it goes back to dull. Well, this kind of, at the beginning it's gross, right? The dullness and the agitation is very gross. But as we deepen in our life experience of this path, we find it becomes more and more subtle. And the samatha is not separate from, at the beginning it's samatha and vipassana, and gradually it becomes samatha vipassana. Right? As I write about this in this Nectar of Naturalness. Sometimes at a crude level, we're asking ourselves the question, like, how do these bodies interact? Right? We may be going, what do I mean by a body? What is a body? Right? And gradually we start to see that it's this whole story that we're looking at is inseparable from the question of knowing. Right? Knowing, experiencing. What do I mean by knowing? Are there many forms of knowing? Are there many domains and dimensions of knowing, or is there just one kind of knowing? And I'm applying that to all the different domains and dimensions. I know the micro, I know the macro. Or is there a possibility of micro knowing and macro knowing within me? And I think there is. Right? I've studied all these books on anatomy and physiology and neurology and all this kind of stuff, and I've looked down microscopes and I've come to the conviction that I'm made up of a lot of stuff that I don't normally notice. And I have this crazy, unproven assumption that I continue to exist after I fall asleep at night. And it's the same me that wakes up in the morning as I went to sleep the night before. I mean, these are working assumptions. So if I truly have an assumption that I have a sensitive physiology which is engaged beyond my skin in a sense, like the environment, the climate, the atmosphere around me is affecting the way my physiology is working. My physiology is changing in response to the changing environment. Then this might raise a question for me. Well, perhaps how could I become quiet enough and actually see what it would like to teach me? Can I settle down into this full richness of here? This ever-present immediacy of now? Can I allow everything else to, can I acknowledge that everything else is resting in the full richness of their here and their ever-present immediacy of now? And this kind of recognition that we can't possibly have all the answers to this. So somehow we're learning to kind of live with a degree of not knowing, right? But a willingness to be extraordinarily open to whatever knowing comes our way, so to speak. I'd like to take us back and just before I do this, sometimes we talk about attaining samadhi. It's almost like we're realize samadhi, attain samadhi. But imagine for a moment you change this a little bit, and my samadhi practice is one of just continual deepening samadhi. That imagine for a moment that samadhi is not an option. You've got no option but to be the full richness of what you are. It's not an option. Right? But the question of our work, our kind of meditation work is like what would it mean to kind of deepen into this, to open into this, And we had this poem that I shared with you last week, and I'd like to take it a little bit further. And I'm going to just read one stanza that I read last week, and then I'm going to skip ahead because it's a relatively long poem. Right? Beginning with the fullness of what you are. You wake up in the morning, it's time for your meditation practice, and beginning with the fullness of what you are. Not what you name, describe or explain, not that fullness, but what you actually are. Okay? I can't explain. All the explanations are me. Don't make a me. Okay? Finding yourself awash on a timeless beach of ever fresh knowing, discovering beingness in you. I mean, there are times when you want to sit down in meditation and focus on your breathing. Sit down in meditation, do the prayers and the sadhana. But this is sit down in meditation and find yourself awash on a timeless beach of now, discovering beingness in you. This is very subtle work, and it's not going to be your thing every day, right? This is more of a formless practice. When you're doing anapanasati, it's like a practice with form. It's kind of a formless practice. So I'm skipping ahead in the poem. Right? And after this kind of rather poetic kind of rant, Tartan rant, right, on everything flowing with the interbeingness of everything else and all that kind of stuff, we come back to the poem. Right? How might we call this suchness in action? Right? That's what this is. This coal face is suchness in action. This is like this kind of beyond words mystery in action. And us in the midst of this meditation. What do we call it? Looking? Being? Softening? Perhaps we call it dissolving. Bending? Blending? Stretching? Responding? This is how we massage our assumptions. Opening? Do we call it opening? Do we call it praying? Do we call it contemplating? Do we call it meditating? Do we call it worshipping? Do we call it reverencing? Perhaps we should call it awareness, or awakening, or continual transcendence, or holing, W-H-O-L, holing, or primordial healing, or deepening understanding. You know, what do you call your coalface work? You know, or do you call it staying with the breath and not wandering? I mean, you could call it that too, but I mean, I'm suggesting there's other things here. How might we call this suchness in action? Looking, being, softening. How might we call this samadhi practice? Okay. Softening, dissolving, bending, blending, stretching, responding, opening, praying, contemplating, meditating, worshipping, reverencing. Perhaps we should call it awareness, or awakening, or continual transcendence, or wholeness, or primordial healing. Or deepening understanding. Or do we need to call it anything? Expanding into the gifting fullness. Living collaborations of sensitive responsiveness. Volumes of sentience within volumes of sentience. Cells within organs, within organisms, within ecospheres. Right? Knowings within knowings. Oceans of knowing in the tiniest drops. Creation, creating, always fresh and anew. Spacious, open, and unpin-downable. Gratitude sparkling all over. Having a period. It's my meditation practice. Sitting down into the fullness of living. Gratitude sparkling all over. This is the most meaningful practice at this moment. Tomorrow it's something else. Yesterday it was something else, right? The support, right? Like learning, like having the tools of subtlety. And what can we do but surrender? Each one of us, all of us, new modes of languaging celebrating this perennial growing, right? Freshly wrought today, this beach, this sand, this salty ocean cradled in radiance, gestating the universe. This womb of mystery ever preparing in love. And we see. There's a stage in the kind of progression of unfolding, which is sometimes called the stage of seeing. Right? The first stage is the stage of accumulation, and then there's a stage of integration, and then there's a stage of seeing. Okay? And this stage of seeing, in a sense, it's that seeing is a kind of a confidence that's dawning in our being, and it doesn't come all at once, all formed and solid. It's not it's not a solid confidence, it's a kind of fluid confidence, right? And it's just increasingly there. It's not always there, but if you turn your mind to it, it's there, right? That this kind of fullness of being is the place of work, this full richness of here, this ever-present immediacy of now, is it. And then begins the work of familiarizing. Right? Now I'm beginning the subtle work. And in this subtle work, we may actually be able to make sense of it may be useful to raise the question of mind and knowing, and maybe even realize that the question of mind is probably a question that only gets raised at the cruder levels. Right? Because maybe we feel that, reducing it to a noun somehow freezes something which is actually continuously flowing and interresponsive. Right? So maybe we could say minding. Right? Or an expanse of knowing. And so at the beginning our work is just to get settled. Samadhi work is kind of, it's cruder. And if you're not quite sure what to do, we go back to, this is in the context of the six parami, we go back to generosity. Right? There's generosity. I'm sitting there in meditation. And it's just kind of just acknowledging, opening, loosening this flow of giving, receiving. Opening this sense of like wholesome relating with like whatever it is that happens to be around you, like to do this in a way that's continuously, that's ever increasingly celebrating the wholeness of the relating. All of me relating to all of you. What can that mean today? The patience, right? A kind of greater skill, greater capacity for recognizing when I'm kind of on this track and I'm sliding off the track. Skilled use of energy. And then finally we coming here to a continuity of caring and enquiry, which is how I phrased samadhi. A continuity of caring and inquiry. The caring part is connected with the samatha. It's not just my calm, but a sense of caring for everything and everyone. Not being full of worry and full of cares. Our phrasing is kind of strange. We could say, oh, the person has so many cares. How wonderful is that? Really generous, wonderful, giving person. But we don't mean that usually. We mean they got all kinds of emotional worries. They got so many cares. Right? We say, you don't care about me. It means you don't worry about me. Right? But when you're caring for a child, what on earth does that mean? How can you care for a child and not be interested in them, not see what they're doing? And I mean, you care for them. It means you look after them, right? I mean, caring for the child means putting them in jail, so you prepare them for the jail of a 9 to 5 job forever by getting them in desks, sitting in desks from 9 till 3 or something, in a state school system. Right? We're caring for them. Is that what we mean by caring for them? Right? Or do we care for them when we really listen to them and try and nurture the best in them? Right? And and with that comes an ease. It feels more easeful when the best is being supported. There's a connection here, samatha, right? And right, so a continuity of caring and enquiry. Right? When you sit down into your meditation practice, how much caring is there? Not tomorrow caring. I mean, right now, in this chair, in this place with Tarchin rattling on, right, and the temperature shifts happening around you and the light happening around you, however it is. Anyone like to share any comments or thoughts or questions? Okay. How we work with this depends on who we're being today. Okay. And in a way there's not a lot to be said. There's lots to be done. And there's not a lot to be said. In the kind of early stages when we haven't really opened the door of Dharma, it's all accumulation, lots of talk, lots of accumulation, lots of get this, get that, and there's a great rosary shop in Rotorua. You can go there and get a fantastic jade rosary. Oh, that's a nice. I got a crystal rosary. You got the right robes, got a fantastic zafu. Well, that's a neat meditation. Oh, where'd you get that Buddha Rupa from? What kind of empowerments have you received? We're accumulating stuff, and then gradually we start accumulating experience. And we still got a lot of people in our retreat hut. They're all, look at that, but he thinks that's a good Buddha Rupa. This is a good Buddha Rupa. A lot of comparison and judgment and all kinds of stuff going on. Right? And then gradually there's a kind of a quiet acceptance. You can natter on in the background, but I'm going to sit here. I'm not going anywhere. Right? And then gradually there's this starting to recognize how we are kind of co-building this together. And that has huge implications. And then we begin to see we can't even say we are co-building this together. There is a kind of an interbeing, inter-knowing nature of the mystery. And a sense of a kind of profound, just a factness of sitting into this and learning from that mystery, not learning from somebody else to bring you into it. Any thoughts or comments?
In the top middle there.
Diana?
Hi, Tarchin.
Hello.
I just want to share the experience that I've been having in Star Group, which you originated when I was first at the Dharma Center decades ago. And now I find myself in a Star Group again. And everything you're talking about today, experiencing, being present, noticing or feeling, whatever word you want to use there, I find that the richness of the moment is somehow inexplicably rich, and even more with being in a star group with the intention, the deliberate intention to connect and to be present with others during the exploration. And it's opening up. It's not the experiences themselves that really, I mean, they're interesting, but it's more the opening up that's the most interesting, rather than what's being experienced in the openness. And being with, maybe a year ago, this wouldn't have had the effect of increasing the sense of trust or willingness to open, but at this point, the being with others who have the same intention or who similar intention leads to even more of a sense of security. Kind of like the 2-year-old coming back to the group, the star group, and then wandering off to explore a bit, and then, oh, it's a bit uncomfortable here, and then going back. It's another form of refuge, which is very helpful. So that's just what I wanted to share.
I think the thing is, there's openness with ourself, so to speak, and there's also openness with others. And sometimes they don't go together. People are willing to be, to a degree, open with themselves, within themselves, and they're not able to they don't want to be seen. They don't allow that inner part of themselves to be seen by another. And actually we need both of these. And the star group work, just the format of the star group work encourages that. And encourages that kind of openness. And you could hold the possibility of extending the star group to, you could have a classic star group with 5 members sitting together. And you could have a star group with 5 Googles of members sitting together. In other words, like all sentient beings in the star group. What kind of star group's that? I mean, it's different. It's a whole different thing. But as a kind of a support model for learning to kind of appreciate and trust, and then use the trust that you have with other beings to take your, in a sense, so-called inner. I'm just calling it inner in the sense that it's private. It's kind of, nobody knows your own direct, full experience. They only know your description of it or what they see of it. And this is not, I don't mean this in any dismissive way. You can see lots of the person, but in a sense, the uniqueness of our own experience, it would mean you've got to have a brain that's functioning, my brain, in my body, with my life experience behind it, and my engagement in the universe, and that's this. So you don't get that. But this sense of, one of the meaning of arahats, which is no secrets, the inner and the outer are in accord. And what would it mean? Sometimes people say, well, I can become tremendously open in retreat and meditation, but then I have to kind of put on my walls and my defense patterns when I go out to work, because otherwise I get smashed. Okay? And this is kind of a very understandable experience, but I wonder if it would be, it's not, is it necessary to accept that as the only option? Or could I have a kind of increasing determination to learn the art of being as open as I can possibly be, and encourage that in others? And what we call openness, gets very connected with the idea of honesty. Where I'm being really honest, and then people say I'm being honest, and I really want to be honest with you. You're a rat bag, right? And what we mean by honesty is just an excuse we make before we hammer them, right? That's not honesty at all in the sense of openness. So if we mean honesty and openness that way, then they're not the same. But the sense like, how could I be as, open, not secretive about it? We're secret about things. I'm ashamed of things. Can I live without shame? I mean, these are big things. So the immeasurable love, immeasurable compassion, immeasurable empathic joy, and immeasurable equanimity, the Brahma Vihara, right, are just the natural resting of samadhi in itself, so to speak. We don't have to become kind of Buddhist philosophers and analyze the workings of mind and all that. I mean, in the end, you're left with this quality, right? In the natural flowing. This is a profound meditation instruction because it's so applicable. In other words, it's not just in the natural flowing of sitting on my zafu, or in the natural flowing of being at the temple, or in the wongkur, or in a meditative state, but in the natural flowing of whatever is occurring. And recognizing that there's a double whammy of whatever's occurring. There's the whatever's occurring that you think is occurring, and then there's the whatever's occurring which is beyond what you think, which is more than just what you think is occurring. You know what I mean? So I'm resting in what's occurring, but then, it might be I'm resting in what I think is occurring. What I think is occurring is you're persecuting me and I'm going to get even with you. But then if I look and see that there was actually more than that, maybe you weren't doing very nice things, and and I'm having this response. But actually at the same time, we're both breathing photosynthetic products from the metabolic process of green plants in relationship with a star. Whoa, the whole thing's getting kind of crazy, and we're exchanging gases, and we're exchanging bacteria, and we're exchanging bugs and dandruff flakes. There's a lot more going on, right? So there's this, in the natural flowing of whatever is occurring. Begin with what you think is occurring, and then learn to open the door so that you can see that it's more than what you thought, or appreciate more than what you were appreciating, right? In the natural flowing of whatever is occurring, cultivating, right? Learning to cultivate, learning like what seeds cultivate this. How do you water it? How do you fertilize it? How do you kind of do the compost for it to cultivate this crop of profoundly nourishing ease? Cultivation isn't just kind of making it. Like, to cultivate a garden requires a vast array of skills. So in our meditation work, we're actually, in a very subtle way, quietly drawing on an entire life of experience for skills, cultivating a continuity of profoundly nourishing ease, which is simultaneously suffused with serene alertness. Right? There's kind of like a kind of readiness to respond. An alert that's not on edge. It's serene alertness, right? When we say alert, you get civil defense will send out a message on your text message on your cell phone. Alert, alert, weather alert. This alert, nowadays the word alert, it's kind of on edge almost, danger, right? But there's kind of a raw, and it's not danger. It's not alertness to anything. It's alertness. How can I put it? It's not alertness to a specific thing. That when we're alerted that way, it's a general alertness. It's like everything. We're, the sound of the bird, the wind, the rain. What is it? Knock on the door. Is that the police? What is it? Like, what is your particular kind of thing that you're guarding against? But you're kind of on edge. Anything can trigger it. Right? But we could say and so in that sense, it's just kind of omnipresent. It's not just in this when we're kind of hyper alert. It get kind of directed all over the place. Right? But imagine for a moment that the alertness is more just the natural kind of wakeful capacity of living organizations to respond. Right? And when this changes, they respond. They're just kind of instantly. Right? Put this chemical into the being, their metabolism changes. They respond. There's a response. And then their mind responds as their thinking or their kind of emotional texture responds to the chemistry. And then their partner responds to their thinking texture. And then your kids respond to your partner. Right? And then the neighbors respond to your kids. Then the dog gets all worked up. You know, it's like, you know, if you follow this is all extraordinary. But this idea of serene alertness and vivid discernment. There's a kind of a wakefulness and a discerning. And sometimes we're discerning with thinking. And sometimes we're, you know, do you think, oh, you know, there's a, how do you know it's warm? Like, why do you take off your sweater or put on your sweater? You know, you have an intellectual knowledge that it's hot because you read it on a thermometer, and then that means when it goes over the thermometer there, you take off your. No, it doesn't work that way. You have a discernment of the heat without words. Right? A fantastic. Most of what makes up our experience actually is you know, when it became silent in that hut at the beaver dam cabin, I didn't disappear. It was absolutely silent, and suddenly I started really noticing the animals and the sound of the wind outside and the drip 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 of a leaky water thing I had, and the crackle of the fire and me shifting and changing all. It was still tons going on, which I wasn't particularly noticing when I was just in the midst of all the conversations. Right? So strangely enough, in the increased calming, right, that you'll find that there's a kind of, the purpose of words is to try and reach out to an other creature. You know, you're either like using kind of non-human language words, like just noises. Some, you know, they say when you're going to bear country, go, hey bear, I'm here. You know, you sort of, they don't expect the bear to understand what you're saying, but the bear gets the message. You're speaking to the bear, right? And you don't say that if you didn't expect a bear there to be listening to you, right? And we're either speaking to we speak to other people, and we speak to other people in our imagination. Right? But sometimes, haven't you ever been able to be with someone and you're just like you enjoy being with them and you're not saying anything and you're not even thinking anything particularly? That there's just the pleasure of shared company, right? That's there. Right? And you imagine for a moment, there's no need to say anything. You know, it's almost like you're so tuned in. You're just thinking, oh, I'd like some salt. And just before you can say, would you pass the salt? They reach out and pass you the salt. Oh, it must be ESP or some kind of amazing kind of extrasensory perception. But I just wonder if this is not just the attunement. You know, we talk about meditation as attunement. And so this serene alertness and vivid discernment, right? You're kind of discerning all kinds of things. But there could be an increasing stillness. Maybe the stillness, silence, goes with the samatha. Okay. Later on we could see, could we have silence speaking and remaining in this state? This is kind of really subtle kind of stuff, but it helps to have a good foundation before you even get there. Okay. So this is just a few more words about something which actually doesn't require words. Okay. the power of these wholesome activities, may our lives be rich with awakening. Living thus, may we abandon all unwholesomeness. In the very midst of this extraordinary mystery of birth, illness, old age, and death, may we help all beings to realize their true interbeing nature. Sarvam Sarvam Sarvam. So thank you all for coming, and I hope all of you, wish you all well in whichever part of the world you are sitting in. Right? It's people from quite a few different parts. Right?